All right. So now we are on to our next session, the exciting session, which is very relevant for SMEs. We are always looking for growth opportunities in terms of customers and funding. So the next session, the tangible and intangibles of fundraising, what investors look for. It's a view from the other side. So it's not only about the numbers. The numbers, they capture revenue, profitability, cash flows, but what lies in the incorporated assets such as integrity, brand equity, work culture, and leadership that investors canvass for look for in a company before investing. To deliver this session, we have Mr. Vinit Bhansali. Vinit is a serial entrepreneur located out of Bangalore, and he looks to invest in consumer and technology startups at Orios Venture Partners, which is an active seed stage investor that invests in innovative Indian consumer startups. And he loves to work closely with passionate entrepreneurs. He's been a serial entrepreneur. He's founded CopperSpiral in 2007 and then Buildkar in 2014. And before this, he was a partner at New Jersey and Florida-based Adeena. And very interestingly, Vinit spends his weekends building Lego spaces with his kids. So if you can't get him to fund you in the office, that's where you have to catch him. Go to his school. Or he walks his dog in Cubbon Park, so that's another lead. And he's also a Chief Environmentalist. With that, Vinit, over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vinit Bhansali. I represent a VC firm headquartered in Bombay, but I work out of their Bangalore office. We are called Orios Venture Partners, just to give you a little bit of an introduction. He was very kind with my introduction. It's more than I expected. But I'm here and I'm happy to take questions at the end of the session. Now, the session is about the tangibles and intangibles of getting funding for your business and investment. And what I realized when I was building this up was, consistently people first need to figure out, A, what the investor is looking for in their company, but also you have to sometimes understand what an investor is looking for in terms of what kind of companies they want to invest in, what kind of, pressures they have on their end from their investors further downstream in the value chain. And so I'd like to take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about this. First of all, a snapshot of the opportunities in India today. There are, everyone here reads the newspapers and we understand that, okay, X got funded, Y got funded, Z got funded. However, I'd like to give you an overview of what is the Indian opportunity, why is this so important, and where we stand over here. The opportunity in India has changed in the last couple of years from where it was maybe 15 years ago. A primary thing that's happened is India already has 300 million internet users today, and we are poised to grow and almost more than double this to about 700 million users, making us the second largest market after China. Another important point over here is you're seeing in India finally the retail consumption story is kicking in. No more does internet and funding only mean an e-commerce company online. Today we are seeing consistently companies that don't even have online as their primary means of selling. They're going to modern trade, they're going to general trade, what we call Kirana stores. Everyone here has been there, but today we are seeing super Kirana stores which are still owned by a single proprietor, but they have added a lot of technology and they're giving competition to the modern trade stores in their vicinity. This is a very important change for India. The consumption is growing, and so the people who are supplying are also improving themselves. India is today the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, about 6,000 startups. We are poised to be at about 12,000 recognized startups by the government. And that's an important metric because finally it tells us that startups have gone beyond being in Gurgaon or Koramangala in Bangalore or maybe Powai in Mumbai. And today we are consistently seeing wonderful startups come up in places like Vellore in Tamil Nadu, interior, tier 3 city in Tamil Nadu. We're seeing startups come up in Nashik. We're seeing startups come up in, tier 2 cities of Rajasthan. I'm sure, if I spend more time in Bengal and the Northeast, you'll be able to point out startups that are doing a wonderful job in smaller towns which are not necessarily something that we would talk about otherwise from a startup perspective. This is a very important metric for all of us sitting here in this room. And as investors, we recognize this, and which is why we consistently look at startups that are able to grow themselves from the smaller towns, because then they intuitively have an understanding for the customers from the smaller towns. What is happening with all of this? The market dynamics today are changing. Gone are the days when, startups or, companies that wanted to grow only had to target, Indian equivalent of the white male, which was still a brown person, but a male, maybe between 18 to 25 years old, who's got a lot of disposable income because, this person is not married, doesn't have kids, most probably living with parents. So, जितना भी salary आता है, 50% of it वो खर्च कर सकता है, right? A high disposable income. That's changing significantly. Today we are seeing that from a typical Indian male who's interested in only a few categories, we are now seeing you have a lot more customers who are women first online customers. Right? So I'm not talking about a housewife who is responsible for the grocery purchase, but I'm talking about the same person who's now got 10 different shopping apps on her mobile phone and is a responsible buyer of products online. Very important metric, right? Another thing that's happening is, again, your millennial, 20-year-olds, they still exist, a large part of the customer base, but we are seeing a significant growth, and I'll show you this further into the slides, in the little bit older. I'm a perfect audience example of what I mean by little bit older. I've got white hair, I'm definitely not under 35 anymore. And this is a perfect example of an audience which is now coming into full force across India, not just in the metro cities. And of course, you're now seeing people beyond metro cities, the rural customer from small towns. This is an important point over here on small towns. A small town has got two definitions in India. Everywhere else in the world, it's got one definition. You're either from New York City or from 200 kilometers away from New York City, which is a small town. In India, you could be a resident of Mumbai and still be a small town customer because you're in the part of Mumbai where you're not necessarily a metro customer. You're using the local train, you're commuting 20 kilometers one way, and your buying patterns are very similar to what was in your small town that you just emigrated from. That's a very important change in the Indian context. To give you an idea of rural versus urban, this is the data that's already up here. You can see, the urban customers are just significantly growing. Even at Orios, we see about 300 million new customers are going to come on board just thanks to Geo and thanks to connectivity in small towns. Some of the points which have led to this big explosion and why you should be interested. Primarily, we are seeing that the average price of smartphones has considerably dropped, continues to drop. I remember about 5 years ago, if I had a conference and, I asked how many people have the best smartphone, they'd all be like, few people have Apples, but other than that, everyone had a basic BlackBerry, right? Today, no one has a smartphone in this room which is less than 5 inches in screen size and a 4G data connection and enough RAM to run the best apps. That's a very important metric change for India. Same thing, decrease in data prices. I remember a time for myself when if I had to download an app, I would wait to get to office or to my house, turn on Wi-Fi, and then download the app from the Play Store. Today it's completely changed, right? Unless I'm traveling out of the country, I don't even look at what I'm using. Am I using my Airtel SIM or my Jio SIM or my home Wi-Fi? It's all the same to me. These points are a little bit in small text, but I'd like to say there's a significant change. Number one is the infrastructure. These are the first 2 points. The infrastructure is in place for you to make use of technology. Number 3 is what do you do with the infrastructure that is already in place? You're seeing India is one of the largest consumers of mobile content and mobile video specifically. And if we have gone beyond mobile video, which just meant entertainment, today mobile video means recipes, it means education, it means first aid, it means getting trained on vocational skills, all of this. And Indian language is a significant chunk. While the slide says Indian language, I like to call it local language because it would be stupid to call any language an Indian language, right? I'm in Bengal, I know what the language is. I only have to fly 1 hour away and, Bengali is not necessarily the local language anymore, right? You'll be in a state where it's an entirely different language. So local language is important. You're seeing all of these companies today starting to build around local language. In fact, we have some apps, and I sent this screenshot to my friends in the US, pointing out an app and said, hey, these guys have $100 million investment, and you cannot use their app in English. It is not an option anymore in that app. So you have to choose an Indian language to open the app, right from Hindi, Gujarati, Bengali, Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, whatever you want, right? English is not even an option for this app anymore. Very interesting. Now I'll talk specifically about the venture capital industry and why we invest in these kind of companies, which as an outsider, you may think, hey, this company is making so many losses. What is wrong with these people? तो भी उनको funding कर रहे हैं, right? I mean, this is a very big problem. You consistently have this conversation over dinner tables and over drinks. The venture capital industry is a new type of industry. It's only been around for about 40 years. And we have decided as an industry that we will invest in negative EBIT companies to begin with. That is the idea over here. And if you will see in the next slide that I have up here, the historical data proves us out. If you see all of the PE and VC firms that invest in negative EBIT companies, you have anywhere from first 3 to 5 years of dropping or negative, IRR from this, right? And then suddenly it's zooming up. This is data. So this is not even something which I'm standing here and suggesting to you that it may work this way. If you correlate this data to actually what a formula a VC firm uses, it comes out to this. This is how you actually look at what a VC firm thinks about when they invest in companies. We understand that the first 3 to 4 years, it will be where there's a net fund outflow, and then suddenly you want to see companies that are significant gushers of money. It's interesting where the top 5 companies on the Fortune 500 list have more cash on books than the other 495 companies combined, right? And all 5 of those companies, every single one of them are VC-funded companies, right? So the data is very clear over here for you. This is about the industry. This is about why VCs look for what we look for. I'll now tell you about some of the tangible things that we look for when we are trying to invest in a startup. And then I'll also talk to you about some of the intangible things. Very interesting areas here. First of all, we look for companies that have a large market that they're trying to tap, right? If there is a company that says, hey, I have identified this particular segment of a person, I will only provide healthcare services to people who are between the ages of 20 and 30, and only for these 2 or 3 types of diseases, that is not necessarily a company that a VC would want to invest in. We inherently look for companies where it's a large market. If you were in a smaller country, then you would look for a company that is at least has some international plans. Luckily enough, we are in India. There is enough local consumption. We do look for companies that will actively target the overall Indian consumer base. I'm not saying every citizen of India, but you should be able to say we are targeting every SME in India at some point in our growth story. We are targeting every student in India at some point in our growth story. These are very important, and we consistently want to look at companies where they have figured this out. The next thing, we look at companies where there is a high frequency of usage by the consumers. At Orios, for example, we have invested in Ola, we have invested in Go Mechanic, but we have not invested in any website that sells cars, because our understanding is we first spend money to acquire a consumer, and then that person may or may not buy one car, and even if they do buy that one car, they're not coming back for the next 3 to 7 years. For us, high frequency repeat usage of the product is extremely important. It's okay if the transaction size is small. Instead of buying a 10 lakh rupee car, I'm perfectly fine if this person is spending 50 rupees on the website every month, but then I know that this is a lock-in for the next, dozens of months going forward. That is where we look for. High frequency of purchase is very important, which is why a lot of B2B companies, when they try to talk to VC funds, you sometimes get a little bit of a negative or a pushback. The point is not that you're B2B. The point is, are your consumers coming back to you every day? There are some significantly well-off B2B companies that VCs have invested in, and they're doing very, very well. One company is called Udaan. Another company that we work with, we've invested, is called Pink Blue. They do medical supplies to hospitals. Perfect example, right? A hospital is buying from them almost every day, every 2 days, every week. High frequency, high interaction. They get to talk to the customers and help them understand the problem and solve different and new problems for them. Another area we look at is asset-light models. So this is actually an example of an asset-heavy model. This is not something a VC firm would be able to invest in or would want to invest in. We'd look at maybe companies, today, everyone's heard this, but the world's largest taxi company doesn't own cars. The world's largest hotel company doesn't own any buildings, right? This is what you're seeing. That is an asset-light model. And we would be willing to invest money in technology and marketing, but not in CapEx. That is a significant change. It is very important for a VC. We look at the team. Extremely important that the founding team is right. What ends up happening is because you're investing in newer business models, it's important for you to look at the founders. The idea may be a little off. When Ola started off, they were not doing cab hailing within your city. They were actually doing intercity taxis. So you could take a Ola from Calcutta to maybe Siliguri or Darjeeling. That was acceptable when Ola started, right? But the team was so strong that they quickly realized that, hey, hold on, this is not a growth model, and let's change our entire business model, which is why the founding team is a very important part for us when we look at investment. Very often you may think, idea is great, why am I not getting funded? Why is there an investment problem? It just could be that the investor figures out that this person is good for this one idea, but maybe they don't have the depth of experience or knowledge to be able to change with the market conditions as required. Now, here are some intangible areas which, I can't necessarily put down on paper and show a formula to you. About the team, again, I can talk to you about a formula. Is he from a good college? Have they got, good experience, good networks? An important area over here for us as investors is the comfort with founders, right? As an investor, especially as an early stage investor, we are not a bank giving you a loan, where as far as I'm concerned as a bank manager, I give you a loan, you pay the interest on time, and that's the end of our relationship. As an investor, we need to feel comfortable with the founders. We need to understand that the founder, he or she is their own person, but at the same time, they are willing to work with us on what needs to change to grow their business. It could be an acquisition, it could be a merger, it could be going for the next round of funding. This is extremely important to us. Apologies if this is too far low. I wasn't expecting this, but at the bottom it says, comfort with founders. The next thing that we like to see is the promoters or the founders who are decisive. Now, a lot of people look at this image and they see a violent image, an act of violence is about to happen. Who does what to whom, I don't know. But to me, what is important is not the left half of the image, it's the right half of the image. There are two different people. They have made two different decisions. One has decided that to hell with this, I can't deal with it, I'm going away. The other person has decided that I'm going to stand my ground and I'm going to do something. Now, which decision is right, which decision is wrong? We can all toss a coin and we'd be equally right or wrong. The point is not about right or wrong. The point is there was a time to make a decision and the founder has to take a call on very limited data. You don't have thousands of customers' data when you're starting off an early company. You need to be very concerned about what decisions you can take with very limited data. This is important to us. Of course, one of the other important things is the ability to articulate your vision, to articulate your story. As a founder, you are responsible to articulating your story to your customers, articulating your story to your vendors, because early stages, you're still a small buyer. You have to be able to tell them why you're important. Articulating your story to investors, of course, very important. Most important is articulating your story to your employees. Today there's a bloodbath to get the right people at any price. And if you, as the founder of your company, are not able to attract the best talent, it doesn't matter whatever else you're very good at. We've consistently seen super rock star founders, because they can't articulate their story, they're better off being a junior employee in a large company doing one task. Maybe running a dhanda is not your forte. It's perfectly fine. again, clarity of vision. One of the most important things we have seen in founders is they very often have to decide what to say no to. Consistently, that's a problem, right? You have 50 options. You consistently have to know what your vision is and where you're going to take it from there. That to me is an extremely important area, and all investors agree unanimously why this is very important. So where is the action? If some of you have started a company, you are running a business, or you're thinking of starting, I'll tell you which are some areas. This is absolutely going to be my last slide. Which are the areas that are very hot in India, targeting the next 300 million users in India? I'll just walk you through it quickly, and then I'll be done, and I'll be open for questions as well. We are looking specifically for startups that are doing vernacular, local language tech, right? I mean, there are some names I cannot yet publicize because we have invested and it's not yet public, but this is an area of extreme focus for India, because we realized that in e-commerce, you could get an Amazon from the US and dump it in India and it does very well. But when it comes to local content, you cannot survive unless you are a local content producer or a local content user. There are companies like ShareChat, even YouTube. Significant chunk of YouTube volume today is local content. The next area that we are looking at is insurance tech. India as a market for insurance is so significantly underpenetrated that almost anything you do with insurance industry to help them, penetrate more is going to be a blockbuster if you do it even 90% right. You don't need to get it 99% right. This is absolutely an open greenfield area in our country. Less than 3.5% of our country has insurance. Even compared to other developing countries, we are off by a factor of 8. It's shocking how low insurance is in this country. We look at Fintech. Fintech is, again, little underpenetrated, but that's also because the target audience is lower. I think it is going to change. And FMCG, we look very attractively at brands. It could be an offline brand, it could be a food brand, apparel brand that are targeting the next 300 million users in India. We have at the bottom aggregation and subscription-based services. We love these because low customer acquisition cost, but a very interesting area for us. That's it. Thank you very much. And I'm open to questions.
Just one question on the high frequency bit that you talked about. Now, Ola or an Uber or, these are concepts, or a Zomato, Swiggy, these are very, very high frequency and also one person buying multiple times. But when you talk about a B2B model, in that case, while the market is huge, the number of potential buyers is huge, but the repeat is not that frequent. So sure. Hospital was perhaps one case, but for example, I talk about services. In services, we know that, SMEs, MSMEs, or the bigger companies, they're all our target segments. How do you address that? I mean, is that a potential scale potential model for you, or?
Sure, I'll be happy to give you an answer on that. It may not be 100% on track. What we've realized is, yes, if you dissect a customer segment one way, you will see low usage. I'll give you an excellent example of a company that every investor in India, they may not publicly say it, but in their mind, they're crying that they never got an opportunity to invest, and this is a company called Tally Software. Right? If I was born 20 years earlier and I was a VC, I would have invested in Tally Software. I would have liked to have done that, right? Never gotten VC funded, and low frequency. You buy Tally Software once, until the next year when they ask you for renewal, you never again have to interact with that company, right? Finance software. So now the conversation is not about Tally, it's about finance software. You buy it once. However, today, if you will see, there are significant fintech companies that have taken subsets of what Tally is doing and tried to make it repeatable. I'll give you an example. I have an app on my mobile phone. It's called Walnut. Like the nut that we eat, walnut. I don't know how many of you have it. Please try it out. It got funded, and then it also got acquired by another large NBFC, right? All of this happened in the last 2-3 years. Walnut allows me to manage my personal expenses, right? So it'll, figure out what you're spending on. Now, this is again a one-time interaction. I downloaded Walnut from the App Store, and then it's running on the background. I don't need to play with it every day, right? Except for the end of the month when I'm paying my credit card bills. However, what they have been able to figure out is give you how you were doing this week in your expenses versus last week, right? They're reading your SMSs and they're like, oh, Vinit just took a flight to Kolkata and he's going to be there for a couple of days. At the end of this trip, the data I am getting is last trip you spent so much on taxi, this trip you have spent so much on taxi. What's going on? Right? So you have to be able to dissect the product you're doing. Now, for example, when you're talking with a lot of large companies, you're interacting with them once a year, maybe twice a year. But then do you give them dashboards that they can refer to every week to figure out how this conference went versus the other conferences? Right? There is significant money to be made with that kind of data as well. That's just an example to your question. Right? I'm happy to take this. You've got to figure this out as the entrepreneur.
Hi, Vinit. That was a nice presentation. Your second slide might need a little bit of change, like it's inflection point, and should be inflection point. The L was missing. So, quick question for you. My name is Anirban. I'm actually, I was born here, but now I live in Melbourne. Now, are you looking for startups or companies which are being set up and then targeting the Indian market as well? That's the first question.
So startups versus companies?
I mean, in the sense that I have a startup, I've started a company and I'm creating a website, and then I would be targeting the Indian market as well. I'm not telling you which sector it is, but are you looking for those kind of startups as well?
Absolutely. We are an early stage investor.
Okay.
Our sweet spot for investing is about $1 lakh to $1 million. That's about 70 lakhs to 7 crores.
Yep.
We sometimes go up to about 10 to 14 crores in investment. We are an early stage investor. We specifically want to be the first institutional investor in any startup.
And the second question is, you mentioned fintech and payment as one section. Now, are you looking at payment as a whole? For example, if I have a dispute engine, which actually tells, like in real time, I call up, the customer calls up and says that I've been charged, say $10 for a telecom call, which I've not made. And then the dispute engine actually runs it with the existing service and comes up with an outcome in 3 seconds.
Sure.
Are you looking in those, or are you looking only for payments where the actual payment happens?
Okay. You live in Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
So if we are paying $10 for a call in India, we are all calling up Airtel and Jio for sure. Fair question. We are absolutely open. Like I said, fintech and payments is the overall theme, but there has got to be subsets to that we will look at. The only way to play this game is subset. We can't look at a company that's doing everything on day one. It may do it at some point. Today Paytm does a lot, but when they started off with one subset only.
Correct.
Right? And we are very open to that. In fact, all investors are consistently very open to that. That is where clarity of vision comes in from my slide. You start off with one goal,
right?
But to reach there, you have to take 10 small steps. Right. And we are okay with that first step.
I'll connect you in LinkedIn. Thank you.
Absolutely. In fact, we have a couple of investments in EdTech as well.
So, we've run out of time, but he's here. We have lunch, so I think you can interact with him.
My flight is not right now.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Vinit. That was, I think, a very interesting session.
Thank you.
So that says it all. Yeah, so, apart from all the hard factors in the numbers, it's about, the founders, the comfort with founders, decisive, articulate, and clarity. Of course, interact with him, and who knows, some of us may get lucky here. With that, I'll request Atul Agarwalji to hand over a small token of appreciation.